In this video, we are going to do some simple alcohol ink effects with some of the things that you can find around your house. Maybe you have feathers or Q-tips. These here are some micro tools that I had in another video for my supply list, and then some paint brushes, various ones, straws, a chain, and then some of the basic colors of inks. So I'm not going to get too much into colors and everything else. I'm going to use the rainbow colors. I find in alcohol inks the reds can make mud a little bit more, so I'm replacing the red with pink. So off I go here. I've already washed all my tiles off, and the first one I am just going to wash on a color. So I'll wash on yellow because I guess it's probably the lightest of the three. So I'm gonna wash on the yellow. And then after I wash on the yellow, so I'm making dots with this. And these are the Jacquard Pinata. I have Senorita Magenta, Baja Blue, and Sunshine Yellow. So these ones are full effect. This means that there's no blending solution with them. The colors are very intense, and you're just seeing what colors you can kind of make in the meantime. You can even dot them over there. It's all very different. But you'll see the difference on the next tile because I'm going to do the same thing, almost the same thing, but with blending solution. So I will mix my blending solution on. I really like using my stir stick, which is over here, and I just use my stir stick to spread the blending solution on here. I see a hair in there, so I'll take that out. And on this one, we're just gonna drop actually from a bit of a height so that you can see how these create various effects. Of course, I've splashed my other tiles, but that's okay. What I want you to see with the splashes is all the movement of each splash. It creates some really cool confetti type things, but you can see this pattern is going to grow and grow. So the blending solution really makes a difference. You can see the difference on these two tiles. Really cool. We're going to be going back to those tiles, but I am going to set them aside to let them dry, and we're going to move on to something else. So with that, I'm going to actually move on to the Tim Holtz here on my next tile. I might give my tile a little wash off with alcohol. It's always good to wash your tiles with alcohol, as hairs are the enemy and debris and all that stuff. So we're gonna wash off our tile and make sure it's dry before you start, because the alcohol can affect how this moves. So what I'm gonna do is I'm taking the Tim Holtz Stream and then some, hang on here, Tim Holtz or Ranger, you can call them Ranger as well, that's the Wild Plum, and then the Butterscotch. And what you're gonna do is you're just gonna paint it across, and you can see how easy it is to paint things with this foam brush. It holds a lot of paint. So I can even, while this is wet, I can drop in some little drops, sprinkle them in. So that is kind of a cool effect on there as well. On my next tile, I am going to give this one a little wash as well. I should probably just give these guys a whole quick wash. They don't have to be perfect, but it's good to get that ink that I splashed on. And as you can see on my tile, it's really created some interesting things over here. This guy just dried really dark. On my next one, I am going to use Fantastics. On this though, I'm going to take my Fantastics, dip it in some alcohol, and I'm going to color inside. So I'm going to show you what it does. So Fantastics is really good for removing color. So if you wanted to do a strip of a color in here, it's going to take on the qualities of that blue and pink and yellow. So if you wanted to remove it so that you have a truer color, you could just take off a strip through here of color, and you just dip it in the alcohol and you keep doing that. And every time the Fantastics is removing quite a bit of color. So there's your little strip. And then you can even use this wet Fantastics to color on a new tile. So you can dip your Fantastics in color, or even put your color right on the Fantastics and color it on. That one has so much alcohol on it that it needs a little bit more, but now you can see that I'm painting on some color on there, and I can even paint it on here so that it has a little bit of like that light blue in it. So that's what we like to use Fantastics for. I'm gonna set that tile aside, and we will do a we'll do some blending, or sorry, some metallics here. So on this one, I'm going to stick a bunch of yellow. Again, make it nice and saturated on the tile, so it's still quite wet. And I'm going to add some Pinata Rich Gold. So that in itself makes some cool little things. It almost looks like little suns. I can even go within that gold and dot a bit of pink in there. It doesn't move in the gold quite as well. It does its own thing. That's what I kind of like about the gold though. It has its own mind. Whereas you can see with the pink there, it blooms a lot more than when it's stuck into the gold. So once again, doing some dots, but just seeing what happens with that Pinata Gold. In the opposite realm, we have the Tim Holtz Mixative, so they have metallics as well. The Pinata has metallics. Tim Holtz Ranger does too. If I dip it in here, you can see it doesn't move as much, even wet on wet. It just doesn't move very much. This is very thick, and it's really good for making controlled dots or figuring out little, you know, patterns in there. I can make a bigger one here and make bigger circles. If your circle didn't turn out perfectly round, you can always go in there with your Q-tip and make it round. As opposed to, I'll put the Rich Gold right beside it. So you can see that you're creating different things. This one looks like it's living and breathing. This one doesn't have as much movement to it. So Tim Holtz, thicker, or Tim Holtz Ranger is thicker. Pinata Rich Gold, thinner, moves around more unpredictably. So you can see that the wet on wet in there created some different things as well. It almost looks like fire. I'm going to use the blending solution once again and put some blending solution on here and use my stir stick. I love this thing, even though it has a little bit of yellow in there. I don't really care, it has yellow on the stir stick. So I'm just mixing that in there. And then I can put a couple drops of blue and maybe a pink, and I already have yellow in there, maybe just one yellow. And what I'm gonna do on this one is just move it around. So you can see it creates little swishes of color. Really fun. Okay, so that is just the color swishing around in there. I'm going to grab a toothpick because I see a big hair in there, and I can pull that out when it's wet. So make sure that you pull the hair out when it's wet. Once it's dry, you cannot pull the hair out. Also with this, you can move a color around on here if you wanted to have a little bit more control. I could go in here and take some Stream by Tim Holtz once again and just go in, and I can make little strips of color like that. So this kind of controls it. It's not beautiful. I'm not trying to be beautiful here. I'm just showing you some of the effects that you can do. What you can do as well is, if you don't like something, you can always take it and run your blending solution down and watch it create like a third picture. So it's just, once again, that blending solution really makes everything nice and smooth and helps the inks travel on the painting. So that is an interesting effect as well. On this one, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to add some alcohol down it. So let's see. Let me just put it here so I can run this alcohol down it. So the alcohol is going to remove that color and create those drips as well. So that was quite dark, that painting of just those drips. So dripping that alcohol down creates some effect. And then you can even go this way and just watch it kind of move. The alcohol does something a little different. So we don't like this one. It's not looking super hot, but we're gonna put it off to the side because we can still use it for something else. Another thing you can do is dots, and you can do that with a lot of different items. I prefer to use these micro applicator tools or dental tools. They're used to clean out your teeth, and dentists use them. But I actually like to dip mine in some alcohol, and then I can just go on here and create some dots. And you can make little dotty trails, or you can make them a little bit more random. It's all up to you. You can even put some color on these and create some dots with color in them. So maybe I want to have a few colored dots here. That one hit the alcohol, so it didn't make a perfect dot. But you can see that these little blending tools are really fun to use. You can also use a paintbrush. So I can go in here, I can even go in this one and add some color. This guy has a hair on it, so I'm not sure why that's, there we go. I think I got it. And just dropping some more dots in here. And just creating more effects with the alcohol. This one kind of turned out into a fiery thing. It looks kind of interesting. So, you know, the blending solution is always good to create those smoother lines. You can see the smooth lines with the blending solution, harder lines with the alcohol. This guy up here is kind of wacky as well. What else are we going to do? Let's do some blending solution and use the, I'm just gonna take this guy. Once again, I have a little bit of color on my stir stick, and that's okay. It's best to wash off your stir stick if you don't want this color on. I see a hair there, so I'm gonna take it off. And this is the Pinata color, so you can see the gold on there moving around. It looks like it's living and breathing. Really, really interesting. And you can even mix the Pinata and the Ranger colors, so you can blend these together. And you can see how the gold moves and how the this is Wild Plum by Tim Holtz. So it's created kind of a nice effect. And another hair. I'm not sure why it's so hairy here today, but that's okay. My cat was down here in my studio, so that could be why. Just important to remove those hairs before your painting dries. So here's another effect. And alcohol. So this one, what I'm going to do is I am going to create a quick little painting with some pink And maybe I'll stick in a little bit, just one drop of blue in there. And then what I do is I'm gonna move my alcohol down here, and I'm going to hit alcohol into these areas. And I'll show you what I do. I just keep adding alcohol more. And I hit the pink first, then I'm gonna wash it off and go into that blue. And then after that, adding a bit of alcohol on both sides. We want this whole thing saturated with alcohol, but we want it to be thickest in the center. So I guess I should have did this one first, so I could have let my alcohol dry, but that's okay. We're just going to let this go in here, and the alcohol is on the entire tile. So this is going to dry differently. I'm going to add a little bit of the metallic color in here. And we're just gonna watch this move around. Watching this move around in the alcohol is actually pretty cool. And knock this in here. The alcohol will be drying so fast that it will actually create rings, which is kind of cool. You can see it happening here already. Some people will use a blow dryer to make this dry faster, or a straw. I highly recommend that if you use a blow dryer or a straw, that you really keep in mind the alcohol fumes, because with the blow dryer adding heat to alcohol, it makes the fumes a lot more. Same with the straw, you're breathing in that alcohol every time you're pushing it around. So I can take this straw, and this is going to create something interesting as it dries. It's already gathering in the seams and all kind of chemical reactions happening there. In the meantime, while that dries, I am going to do yet another effect, which is taking the blending solution and dotting it in. I want you to see how different it is. I dotted the alcohol in and it bloomed. Wait until you see the blending solution, which is going to bloom even more. So I drop this blending solution on here, take off that extra dot, and then I dot it in here, and it is going to bloom as well. Blending solution is famous for over blooming, and it can get in the way of your painting, so you just have to be careful with it. It's one of my favorite things to use, but you really have to make sure that you don't overuse it, because it will bloom and wreck your painting. So you can see here that I've created a bit of a dot mess down at the bottom, and that's okay. You can even stick some alcohol dots in here if you wanted to make a little trail into the white, maybe change up the color. Even over here, drop some drops in there. It just creates a little bit more interest in the painting, in your abstract painting that you're doing. These little effects are kind of fun. And once again, on this painting, I am going to do blending solution down it so we can see what happens and watch it kind of move again. And sometimes if you leave the old remnants of your painting in there, it just adds a little bit of mystery in between. So this could make a really cool rainbow kind of drippy painting. If you don't like what you did before you erase, I always pour blending solution on it. Just give it a little, I always call it the Hail Mary. This is going to dry into something kind of interesting. As you can see, my alcohol ink painting is drying over there. I'm going to take this one, actually maybe this guy, and I'm going to dip my feather into a little bit of alcohol. So I've dipped a feather in alcohol, and I can just run it along here, and you can see it creates some interesting effects. So here's some effects for you to play with and work with alcohol inks. I'm going to move this one here again. This thing, I can always alter this, or another thing I like to do is I like to do dot patterns in the less interesting areas, or areas where I want to cover up something. So sometimes even doing a cluster of little dots in the corner is kind of fun. And maybe just some random ones in here. And if I want a bigger dot, I can color it in. I'm just dipping this guy in alcohol. So there you go. You can see the feather painting made a very interesting painting. You can even try this feather if you want. This is a harder feather found at the craft stores too, and you're going to be making more defined lines with this one as well. So just having those unpredictable things, that's really fun. For this guy, I might even dip him in some blending solution. I have a ball chain here, and I'll just put some blending solution on it. Okay, so I'll just dip it on like this. Okay, and run this along, and you can see it creates another effect as well. Not really doing as much as I had hoped, but this is very, very dry. So if I just threw some blending solution on there maybe, and just took that ball chain, you can see that it creates some fun effects. This is still so dark that I'm not really going to get those beautiful colors out of it, but I did alter it slightly by using that ball chain there. And that is pretty much it. Here's my blending solution one. Didn't really turn out super gorgeous, but once again, if you wanted to really work at this and kind of play with it, you can do those little dots again and take out some areas so that it creates more interest, and keep the parts that you like. So this was really just an experiment and just watching them all kind of move. I used 3 colors for this entire thing in each of the 2 brands that I like to use. The Butterscotch, Wild Plum, and Stream in the Tim Holtz Ranger, and then I used the Sunbright Yellow, Baja Blue, and Senorita Magenta in the Pinata. I also used a copper mixative and the Pinata Rich Gold, blending solution, and alcohol. So all these implements that I have will be listed in the description.